Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Brett Davis Show. Of course, I'm Brett Davis, and I'm here in beautiful Coronado today with somebody that I've always had admiration for. It's kind of the way I live my life. I'm kind of a scrapper myself. Uh, Padres, in my mind, legend. I don't care what anybody says because to me, you are a legend, Kurt Bevacqua.
How are you?
Good. And Sarah was trying earlier when we were putting the show together. She's like, how do I describe Kurt? I says, well, first of all, he's known as Dirty Kurt by a lot of people because you typically had the dirtiest uniform on the field, which is something that I think we all should strive for, right?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people think the Dirty Kurt nickname has something to do with nighttime activities or whatever, but it's actually not. I mean, Pete Rose gave me that nickname when I came in off the field in my early years with the Reds. So it's actually because of a dirty uniform.
There you go. Now there's something you all need to know. It's because of the dirty uniform that he always had. The other thing is, you hit 412 in the World Series in '84 and hit 2 home runs against the Tigers.
Had a pretty good World Series. It was a good week. Very exciting time here in San Diego, and certainly for the Bevacqua family.
It's really strange. I mean, that whole year was an amazing year. The beginning of the year, it really seemed like something was special about that team, the way everybody worked together. The thing that I always felt going after the playoffs with the Cubs, I had this feeling that you were just going to kick butt. I don't know what it was. It was maybe because I'm an old player myself, but I thought he's going to shine. He's the guy to watch in that World Series, and it turned out to be true because you had a great series.
Well, you and Dick Williams knew it. I don't think the rest of us did.
Oh, it was more instinctive, I think.
We look back at a lot of people ask me, who was the best manager you ever played for?
Dick.
He has to fall into that category because
you played. Okay, well, tell us who the top manager you think you played for.
It was Dick. It was Dick, and you really don't realize it at the time because he could be a little edgy.
But that's not bad because I think that brings out the best in people.
It's not bad at all. I mean, that's just the way he was. Could he get by managing like that now in the big leagues? Probably not. The front office wouldn't let him, for one thing, and the players certainly would be running up to the front office complaining about it all the time because that's what they do now. So it's but I played for a lot of good managers. I mean, Alvin Dark, Danny Murtaugh, Sparky Anderson.
Sparky's amazing.
Well, I was with Sparky or I should say I was with the Reds when Sparky was the manager there, and I never got to the Major League club. But Jack McKeon told me something on my podcast a couple of weeks ago that I didn't even realize.
Trader Jack.
The first deal that Jack made when he became general manager of the Padres in July of 1980, he traded me to the Pirates. And he told me during our conversation on my podcast that it was between the Reds and the Pirates on where I was going to go. He said they both wanted me, and he almost traded me to the Reds, and we were in Cincinnati when I got traded to Pittsburgh.
Wow.
So he told me that night that you almost went from one clubhouse to the other. So I didn't even know that until he told me that. But it's always nice when you hear, and it's a surprise, that another club, especially
Reds.
Oh yeah, another club as put together as a Cincinnati Red organization is, wanted you on their ball club. So it's nice.
They were my second favorite National League team. Padres being first.
Really?
I like the Reds second.
Okay.
That's just me.
Yeah.
I like the way the team was run. I met Sparky a few times in the old days. I liked his demeanor. I never got a chance to meet Dick Williams, but I saw him from afar and how he managed. And I thought those are the two teams that resonated with me. The way the team ran, the way the managers ran the team, there was a respect. Those names during that time were, those managers were amazing.
They really were. And if you look back at the teams that those two guys managed, they're all winners.
Sure.
I mean, they were all winners. I mean, Dick came from the Oakland organization, and then he came here to San Diego. He was in Boston, and Sparky, of course, with the Cincinnati organization during their heyday of the Big Red Machine. And then he went on to manage arguably one of the best teams in Major League history with the '84 Tigers.
Sure. No, I think it was great.
It was.
So what was it about your career? When did you realize, because you got drafted in the second round?
I did it one. I was drafted 5 times before I actually
Really?
signed. Yeah.
I've never heard of that. 5 different times you were drafted?
Yeah. Because they had original draft and secondary phases. So the secondary phase, which they've done away with now, you could get drafted 2 times in the same year.
They don't do that anymore, of course.
No, they don't. It's much too orchestrated now.
But this is what I've found, and you can correct me because you have more knowledge in this area. I saw a lot of really good players that were never drafted, and I saw players that I wondered, how the hell did that person get drafted?
You know what? It's a crapshoot. It really is. I mean,
is that true though? I mean, you've seen some great players and think, why was that person drafted?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then you have the people that got drafted, and you're like, why did they get drafted?
To be perfectly honest with you, you don't see too often where guys get drafted that maybe shouldn't have been drafted. But there are favors that are done, but they're far and few between.
Okay.
I mean, you look at Mike Piazza.
Yeah, he wasn't a first round draft pick.
He was a favor. I mean, if you can believe it. Oh no, he went way at the end.
Right.
At the end.
As a favor, because they really.
If it wasn't for Tommy Lasorda, Mike Piazza might have never been drafted.
Tommy was friends with Mike's father.
He was.
Something like that.
Who unfortunately just passed away in Philadelphia. The Piazza family is a great family in the Philadelphia area. They're very successful. Papa Piazza did a great job raising those boys, and Mike's brother Tony runs the Piazza Auto Group back there on the East Coast. They're very, very successful.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Mm-hmm. So the patriarch of the family did a great job, and so did Mama Piazza, who is alive and well. I'm sure she's missing her.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
her husband. But
of course,
but it's a great family. But you look at a situation like that and you go, how can everybody in baseball miss this kid as far as the number of rounds that there were? I mean, when Mike Piazza was drafted, it was probably 40 rounds.
So here's the thing. Maybe he wasn't at that level. Maybe somewhere along the way, there was a wake-up call that he needed to become a better player in some way. Maybe there was something in him, but maybe he needed to be challenged a little bit for it to come out.
And I think that happens with a lot of guys. So if you're a younger player and you believe in yourself, I think desire and determination makes up for a lot of less ability in a guy. And if you have a little less ability than the guys that you're looking at around you at the time, if you have the desire and determination to do it, you could become more successful than the guy with the more ability.
Well, the Piazza is a good case in point, because like Pete Rose, apparently he wasn't at that level that he ended up becoming, of course. And I understand he started training different. He started doing things differently than he had done before, and it seemed to really make a difference. He became a Hall of Famer, of course. Played for the Padres for a short time, right?
Is this
Piazza?
He did.
A couple years.
He did.
Probably one of our best catchers.
I think I don't even remember what year.
For a couple years.
I want to say the early 2000s.
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah, I think
I think he was a great catcher. I think he was a phenomenal hitter. Now here's the thing. You go into baseball, you love the game, of course, you're passionate about it. When you were playing, where did you see yourself playing in the majors? Did you think, I'm going to be in the majors, this is what I'd like to do? Or did you just kind of become the ultimate utility type player as time kind of evolved and realize that was your calling and you're going to be the best you could be?
I think about this, and I talk to people about this all the time. It's one of those things where I believe, especially at the beginning of my career, I was just along for the ride. I was just taking it day by day and not really setting a timetable for what I wanted to do. As a matter of fact, I never had a timetable for reaching the major leagues. You know why? Because I never thought about it. I just thought that if I went out there and played every day and had a good time, that I would just get where I was supposed to be. And not until we were sitting around, um, I believe we were in the dugout in Tampa, Florida, and I was talking to a few of the guys on the team, and we were talking about guys. First time I'd ever had this conversation with any of my teammates. We were talking about guys that were going to make it to the big leagues.
Yeah, that's usually a talk that guys have when they're coming up.
But I had never had it yet. So there was a guy by the name of a right-handed pitcher by the name of Bobby Hall that was from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. First time I had ever heard that town's name before in my life. And I respected him because he was kind of a gritty kind of guy. And I liked him and I respected what he said. And he surprised the heck out of me when he came out and said that Bevacqua was going to be one of the guys that makes it to the big leagues. And the other guy on the team was Concepcion.
Yeah.
So
Dave Concepcion.
Dave Concepcion. And it was really the first time that I really started to think about it, because I looked at the other guys in the organization, the Clyde Mayshores and the Wayne Simpsons and the Bernie Carbos. I mean, we had some unbelievable minor league players that were in that organization at the time. And then you look up the big club and you see the players that are up there. You go, how can you crack that lineup? How can you make room on that roster for yourself? And that was really the first time that I started to think about it. And then you go from A ball to double A and you see the quality of players. You look around and you go, "Ooh, this is a tough act to follow." I mean, these guys are good. So you really realize where you are quickly when you sign to play professional baseball, because you report, you take the field, and you are literally surrounded by players that most of them are probably better than you.
But I think when you play with those types of players, I found that you perform better yourself.
It makes you better. It absolutely does. And that's why I always tried to let my two boys play up as much as I possibly could. But there's a fine line there too, because if you get them a little bit too high, then they can get discouraged because they're going to be overmatched.
You'll lose their confidence.
Right. And that's really important, as you well know, in the game, whatever game it is that you play.
Sure.
Is your confidence level and your mental approach to the game. So it's always fun to look back and think about, where I was and how things started. And I tell people all the time, I'll never forget the first day I put on a professional uniform in Tampa and I took the field. And I went out and went, should I even be here? I mean, these guys were all really, really good.
Did you think a lot of people that are gifted that way probably in their minds probably think that a little bit?
I'm sure every one of
Right.
them does. And it doesn't matter who you are.
Because that's like it's like the golden chalice of sports. I mean, you're with some of the best players.
I don't think, I've never talked to too many guys about this particular subject. Don't know why.
I think it gives you an insight of things that are not really being talked about with the game.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject, and it would be interesting, I'm sure, for all the listeners and viewers to find out what the mindset was of certain players.
Sure.
Going into whatever particular sport that they're playing.
I think a lot of people would be surprised at what probably they would say.
I'm sure.
They would probably not believe it. I mean, like you talk to somebody like yourself or, I think Pete Rose, and I could be wrong, but Pete probably thought he was going to make it one way or the other.
Oh, well, I mean, if you look at Pete and you see what he's achieved in the game, certainly you would think that he's cocky enough and believes in himself enough that just the way he played. But sometimes people play like that because they don't believe in themselves very much, and that they have to put out 110%, whenever that's possible.
Sure.
Put out over 100%, but the 110% thing. I mean, Pete played like that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't matter if it was a spring training game, if we were doing an exercise in spring training, Pete wanted to be first, and he was just like that. I mean, he was a good guy to be around as a younger player.
So you, Tim Flannery, Pete Rose were my three favorite players.
Well, that's pretty good company to be in.
Well, because you guys could get disabled or be in some type of situation where you weren't your best, but you would really zero in or focus. And there was a key word I'm probably missing, but you could find a way to block whatever was going on with you personally and get the job done to your best ability.
And that's something that I've lived by my entire career. I think Flan was very similar in that he was a hard-nosed, gutty, gritty type of player.
Sure.
And we all know that Pete Rose played like that all the time. I mean, if you remember this, there's one iconic picture of Pete that I think is the epitome of his career.
Is that Fosse at the plate?
No, it's not even that, because that was too bad. I mean, Ray and I were teammates on the Cleveland Indians for a couple of years in the early 70s. And, I saw what that collision did to him.
Sure. No, he's never the same.
He was really never the same. And although I think it was clean, it was certainly clean.
It's illegal. It's illegal now.
I know it is.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Should it be illegal?
No,
I don't think so either.
No, I don't think you go in to cut somebody's legs out from under him.
But if they're blocking the play,
like they used to do, and Hal McRae and George Brett were famous for it.
Sure.
Going in the second and trying to break up the double play. I mean, I saw Hal McRae take Willie Randolph into left field one night. I mean, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Right.
And they complain about some of the slides at second base now, and it's comical. I mean, it really is. The game's gotten really soft.
It's not as physical as it once was, and I think people like the realism of those types of things. I think when you take that away, I mean, I think it's somehow, like you said, it softens the game. I think people like to see baseball be real baseball, raw, like a raw type of game where people are fighting and trying to achieve. Because here we are now, and we talked about this a little bit. And I actually had some people make comments about. We had talked about the way baseball is now. A couple of days ago, somebody told me, "Well, you'd said that that you didn't like the way the food was situated at the stadium." I said, "No, I didn't say that. What we said was that those things would become more important than the game itself. I mean, before it was just you get your nachos, your hot dog, your beer, your Coke, your Cracker Jacks. And now you have all these variety of restaurants to bring in people that maybe wouldn't go to a game. But what that does, it takes people away from the game." And so I said, we had talked about that briefly, and somebody said, "Well, why?" I think it's great. I said, "Well, no, it's great to have that. But I think the message we were trying to get across was people are not involved with the game like they once were, because their mind is elsewhere. I mean, you have people on their cell phones, you have people getting up to go to this restaurant, that restaurant, and the game's not as we are so much information overload, period, as human beings today compared to when we're in the 80s, 90s, whatever, that people's minds are just not focused on a simple thing like watching a baseball game."
It's funny that you say, not funny, but it's curious that you say that, because on my podcast on Thursday, I'm going to have a gentleman by the name of Ken Kernan on, and he used to be a staff writer for the San Diego Union. He's been involved with Major League Baseball since 1979, but he wrote a great article in a blog that he writes for ball9.com, and it's concerning what the game has gone to. And in particular, the fans that come to the ballpark and how much time they spend away from the game. They're at the ballpark, and it doesn't matter where you are. There probably are some exceptions, but at Petco, I see far too many people that spend 75% of the time out of their seats. And it's just like you said, it's crazy.
I never wanted in those times when you were playing, I never wanted to leave my seat.
Absolutely.
I was afraid I was going to miss something.
I never wanted to leave my seat in the dugout if I wasn't playing. I mean, it's crazy now when I see people get up and, I don't really track people.
But you can see
that are at the absolutely. You see people, you see a group of people when you go to get some nachos at Petco at the beginning of the game, and then you go back there in the 5th or 6th inning, you're still there. I mean, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But you know what? The owners aren't going to complain about it because those guys are spending a lot of money.
Sure.
They're up at the bar. They're continuing to buy beer after beer after beer. And that's the part of it that bothers me a little bit is the consumption of alcohol at the individual ballparks. I think it's gone a little bit too far.
We are the craft beer capital of the country.
I think there's far too many people that leave Petco Park that are intoxicated.
We had that going on back in the day. People were drinking.
I'm not saying it was any better.
You're saying it's more now.
Now I'm noticing it more.
Okay.
So we'll just keep it right there.
Yeah. Okay.
So
and look at who.
There's a $15.
Right. Well, yeah. You gotta use your gold card.
Yeah. No kidding. Jesus, crazy.
So here's something else. The Padres, as far as I can tell, are still very community orientated in the community. I have a friend of mine who works for the Harbor Police, and they do a lot of things for a lot of the schools. Kids, they get bikes to the schools for kids who maybe can't afford things. We're in a situation where I know some baseball coaches that are coaching high school where they're looking at cutting baseball programs. I don't know if you've heard this at all.
I haven't.
Yeah. So some of these high school teams, some of these teams are maybe in the chopping block where baseball won't be in a program anymore at a school. And I think that's sad because we shouldn't be stopping these types of programs or team sports because it brings team spirit to the school. It also, I think it's important for the growth of kids because they learn how to work with other people. One thing about teams, and you know this, you don't always like the people that you work with, but the job has to get done. You still have to find a way to put your personal feelings aside to win. And I think that's one thing that team sports teaches kids, because in the real world, they have to learn to be able to work with people that they're not going to get along with. And the outcome is to try to be your best and have a victory. So I hate to hear that these programs may be on the chopping block. And so my thing is, why aren't we doing more to make, baseball in San Diego from a youth standpoint more viable and stronger than it is? Because we can't forget that sport. And if they're talking about putting it on the chopping block, that's not a good sign.
Well, when you talk about situations like that, and you talk about it happening here in San Diego, which is probably as rich, if not richer, than anywhere in the country when it comes to talent coming from a certain area, and that's Southern California. Why isn't Major League Baseball and the individual teams that are in these towns doing something about it?
Well, I think it's a topic that comes up with somebody from the Padres, but I agree with you. I do see the Padres reaching out and doing things for the schools. One thing I may need to be educated on this. I think like you said, Southern California, we have a lot of raw talent here. We should be like any farming these kids and making sure that everything is, being properly taken care of. And there needs to be more than just an all-star game at the stadium. I know they have this gigantic all-star game where the prep players come together. And I don't know, other than that, if the Padres are getting involved with kids from the very beginning, like in elementary school, which is a good time to start.
Well, it's a good time for Major League Baseball. Another Kevin Kernan topic this Thursday on my podcast, Dirty Kurt's Dugout, is going to be what's happened to baseball across the heartland of the United States. It's virtually disappeared. And we're talking about it disappearing in some of the ripest baseball areas of the country in Southern California. It's certainly disappearing in the Kansases and the Nebraskas of the world, because it's just not played anymore. And if programs are disappearing from high schools here in San Diego, you know damn well that they're disappearing from high schools across the country. And it's a shame. And it shouldn't be happening. Major League Baseball shouldn't allow it to happen, for one thing.
Well, one thing I'm hearing about is the price for equipment is not cheap. It never was when we were growing up anyway. I mean, we weren't given a lot of those things. We either got a glove for a birthday present or a gift, or some bats from, my father bought me all my stuff. And when I got a job, I bought my stuff. But the equipment is expensive, of course. And there's some kids that can't afford that. And again, anybody that's listening, I'm not saying teams have vanished. I'm just saying that I've been approached by some high school coaches that run teams locally in the CIF area, that they're concerned, and there has been discussion about getting rid of some of these teams from some of these high schools. And you're right. This should not be happening. And I think we need to figure out what's going on and try to stop it before it goes away, because once it's gone away, it's going to be hard to get it back.
Well, we've talked about my career, certainly, so far on this show. When we've talked about Mike Piazza, some guys that we haven't talked about are the Ken Griffeys. And
a senior or junior?
Ken Griffey Jr.
Junior.
And the
Pops was a pretty good player.
Oh yeah, he was. He sure was.
He was solid.
But we talk about the guys like Alex Rodriguez that come up that are going to be major league players. But you talk about the Piazzas and the Bevacquas of the world. If baseball programs disappear, the Rodriguezes and the Ken Griffey Juniors are still going to be coming up, going to the big leagues, but the Piazzas and the Bevacquas are going to disappear. That's what's going to happen, because they're always going to find the great players. I mean, baseball right now has control over baseball throughout the United States, in my mind, with the subtraction of all the minor league teams and just them concentrating on certain teams and making other teams independent ball, where they're responsible for their own expenses and upkeep. Major League Baseball doesn't have anything to do with it, but they can still draw from it.
Sure.
So
this is something that I think is valuable, and we both understand. I agree with you 100%, by the way. I agree, because I think it's and then I think, can you imagine if these teams start disappearing from these high schools? So there's wisdom you have in this situation, and I know all these people, and I'm thinking, why isn't somebody stepping up and saying, what do you need? What do you need help with? I mean, because that's the first thing, because sometimes people are embarrassed to speak up, or too shy, or maybe they don't want to rock the boat. But if they don't do that, then these teams will start to vanish more and more and more. And we're seeing that happen. We've already seen classes that have been cut, like the basic things like wood shop, metal shop, what other things, home economics, all these types of things that teach people that maybe are not going to go to college. They teach them how to survive and how to be functional in the world. And my thing is with baseball teaches you, and you know this better than anybody, how many different varieties of things that baseball teach you in a philosophical way that has affected you as a person in your life?
Well, a lot. And I think there's a lot of things that you look back on that you don't even realize that you were taught, that at the time, it's just part of the flow.
Right.
And then you realize that you learned how to be a better person. You learned how to communicate with people. You learned how to be a good friend, because that's what the chemistry on a good baseball team is. Doesn't matter if it's a major league team or a minor league team
Mhm.
or a high school team for that matter. But getting back and touching on the high school problem real quick. Uh, it's got a lot to do with funding. I mean, we went to one of the most prestigious high schools in San Diego as far as the baseball program was
San Diego
concerned.
School of
and that
Baseball?
was LCC. My two kids went to high school at LCC,
What's LCC?
La Costa Canyon High School.
I've never heard of it. Oh, yeah, I've heard of the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have a great baseball program up there, but it's not funded well at all. So
Which is surprising
sure it is,
because demographically you say La Costa, and right away you think funding and money.
so it's no different at LCC than it is anywhere else in the county. And whether the baseball program is in the upper echelon or whether it's at the bottom as far as win-loss record is concerned or not. There's only certain coaches that are on the team that are able to draw a salary. And the rest of the guys, they're just there.
So that's something else that you just brought up that came up in the conversation with these other coaches. The coaches of today are not also teachers.
And if they're not being paid.
So there's a situation, right, where the coaches, and I don't remember how, I mean, in my day, I can tell you what it was. I don't know how it was for you when you were in high school, but my coaches all were teachers. And they would get paid their salary. And yeah, they got some money a little bit for the coaching thing. But now they're actually recruiting people that are not teachers in a lot of cases. And so not everybody's going to be able to pay a coach a decent wage because, they can't. John Wooden was also another person that started his career like that. He was one of the greatest coaches who ended up making his money as, teaching. They brought him in and paid him through his teaching, but he got to be the coach. So, I mean, we have to, that's another thing as economically, the schools have changed the way that they are working with the coaches. The coaches that I remember stayed at that school. They were there from morning until night. They were entrenched in the kids' lives. And by the way, those coaches that we're talking about in my life are still around. They haven't gone away. They still get together. We get a bite to eat. A lot of my football coaches, my baseball coach, unfortunately passed away a few years back, but all of us were still getting together with them. They never stopped watching over us because they were so, I think that's a lost period of time that we're not going to ever see again.
And what do you do going forward?
Right.
It's a precarious situation because everybody's looking to save as much money as they possibly can. And if people knew what major league coaches were paid, they would be really surprised. Let's put it that way.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a bad way.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I've heard some amounts of money that are like.
I'm not talking about major league managers.
Oh, you're talking about like first base coaches,
talking about
third base coaches.
Yes.
Okay.
And the negotiation with them is much different than you would suspect.
I didn't see this is another area nobody ever thinks about.
And I'm not pointing the finger at AJ Preller here. I'm just using him as an example.
So AJ, we're not blaming you.
Exactly.
This is part of the discussion.
That's exactly right. And he knows better. So it's cool. But a coach goes in or they interview a guy to be a coach for a major league team. It doesn't matter what major league team. And the general manager or whoever is doing the hiring could actually say, I realize you want 125,000, but we're only going to pay you 75 because you're also getting medical benefits and that's worth another 50. And this is the way they negotiate with coaches who don't have a union.
Something seems off with that whole thing. So they don't have an agent.
They don't have an agent.
So they're kind of in that gray area, right?
Big time. Big time. They're in the gray area. And so are minor league players. I mean, they're not represented by anybody.
So when they become managers, that changes. They're more in a circle in a different area because they're major league managers compared to coaches. No?
When you become a major league manager or when you become a major league coach with a lot of experience that has a well-known name in the industry, then you're a commodity. But the rest of the guys are just filling slots. That's basically what it boils down to. I'm not even going to point out certain guys or certain positions on a major league team because it's unfair. But for one thing, they've got, I don't know what the heck a major league team does with 10 coaches or 8 coaches. I mean, how do you need that many coaches?
That's probably something we could look into in the future. That's a good thought. I mean, just maybe there's a lot of waste.
But not all those coaches are getting service time either.
Right.
So there's only 5 positions on the coaching staff that are provided service time in any given calendar year or major league season year. And that is procured by the front office. So I'm going to use Bochy as an example because they had a long tenure.
Great manager, by the way.
Exactly. And Flan and Dave Rigetti, the guys that were with the team and certainly didn't need any more service time. They went up to the front office and they asked the front office one day, why don't you take us off of the service time register and put these younger guys on it because we don't need it. I mean, we already have 35 years. We don't need more than 10. You're not going to make more on the pension plan because you have 35 years over the guy that has 10. It's the same. They wouldn't do it.
So any of these things that we're talking about, and this is going into another subject, is that having anything to do with the potential strike?
It does and it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't from the player side because coaches and major league managers, even though they might have been once players, aren't protected by the Players Association anymore.
Okay.
They're now management. So if MLB doesn't care about these guys, the Players Association sure as hell doesn't care about them. And we know that MLB, the only reason they care about the players is because it puts money in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
They're an asset.
Well, I think anybody in sports is considered an asset, right?
That's a true story.
Pretty much we're like a horse.
But
somebody owns the leg, somebody owns the torso, somebody owns the head.
Yeah, but you know what? It was never thought about and it was never voiced until, let's say, the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
That players were assets. And I think the first time I ever heard it, it really hit home because we kind of knew we were pieces of meat back then. And especially before free agency was in existence in Major League Baseball. I mean, the NFL didn't even have much of a union up until a few years ago. You know, the NBA, they've got a great commissioner in the NBA in David Stern. And it's good that he's there. But, you know, I think the commissioner of Major League Baseball right now is hell-bent on destroying the union. That's my personal opinion.
Okay. I think that the game that once was all about being fun has been lost with money. A simple thing like throwing a ball, you know, hitting a ball, swinging your bat, being a kid, running around, you know, something very innocent, very pure about that whole thing, but yet very passionate because you could do it all day long, right? Which we used to do it till the sun went down. Money, even, I mean, when you went into the majors, I mean, you loved the game. You still do love the game.
That's why we played back then.
Right? I mean, of course,
I like the 1st and the 15th too. Don't get me wrong. Even though at the time I thought I was stealing money.
Right. Because you got to do what you love to do.
Absolutely.
Not everybody gets that opportunity.
That's true. It was a great time. And I look back on it now, people ask me a lot, you know, what was the most fun time you ever had playing baseball? Was it the World Series in '84? You know, was it the great year you had in '78 with Texas? And I go, no, it was when I was in the minor leagues. bus rides and playing double headers and then getting on a bus and driving for 10 hours and playing another doubleheader, one in Denver and the other one in Wichita. And that was fun. It was fun. We didn't look at it as work. I mean, we had a great time. And that's why earlier on in our conversation today, you were asking about when did I know, or when do players know if they're going to make it to the big leagues? We didn't even think about it. We just went out and had a good time. And it was, it was fun to go out and play. We cared that the lights might not have been great at the stadiums that we were playing in, but we didn't complain about it. We got $3 a day meal money, and
wow.
And it was somehow we managed to survive. Thank God for $10 White Castle burgers down in the South.
Actually, it's still pretty good.
You're not lying. Yeah, I've got some in my freezer right now.
Yeah, they're pretty good. When we're in Vegas, we always grab some. So, how the game's changed a lot since when you played? There's been some things like we talked about, rushing, hitting the catcher at home plate. There's probably some other things. How has the role of the utility specialist, how is that used nowadays? Is it being used quite the same, or has it changed?
I think guys are getting a lot more playing time now that would have been in my era good utility players, because they're getting them in and out. The guys are, for better use of a terminology, a little softer now. They're not, you got pitchers that can't throw 200 innings anymore. So that's out of the question. Your top of the line guys are at around 150 to 170, and they're iron horses as far as baseball is concerned. But you've got your everyday players. They don't look to go out and play 140 to 150 games anymore. They're at around 120.
So I would play every game, every inning. I wouldn't want to come out. I mean, you'd have to cut my legs off, right?
If you could,
right?
Yeah. But that's not the way it is anymore.
So these utility players that are around, who in your mind, when we mention utility player, can you name a couple of names that maybe stand out in your mind? I mean, or is it a lost positions? Because that's a specialty. It really is.
And I don't think there's anybody anymore that's labeled,
right? I don't think
a
so either.
Utility player.
So I didn't think so either. I thought maybe you could shed some light on that, because I don't know any of them that are around.
No, there's guys that Francisco Cervelli, who's going to be a coaching or a catcher's coach on the San Diego Padres this year. That's a guy that came from the Pittsburgh Pirates that was a pretty darn good player, but he didn't play every day. But I don't ever remember seeing him being termed a utility catcher, a backup catcher. Like Bruce Bochy was a backup catcher. You don't hear that terminology being used anymore. No. You just see that a guy that they've got 3 catchers on the roster, and they find a way to mix and match and get him into the lineup. Even though managers back in the day knew how important it was to use guys, there are some managers that knew that there's guys that don't need to play every day.
Sure.
That if I put him in every couple of days to face a certain guy in a certain situation, he's going to perform at his best. You don't see guys that are like that anymore, that are strictly pinch hitters. The Manny Motas of the world.
Manny Mota was amazing.
The Jose Moraleses of the world. Just, those guys are gone.
Merv Retman
was good. He's right here in San Diego.
He was a great pinch hitter.
He was.
Even Jerry Turner occasionally was okay.
Boy, JT I saw him in an alumni function back in September. And he's lost all of that baby fat. And he looked good. It was good to see him. Yeah, he was a heck of a guy coming off the bench.
I admire people like that, because I think it also tells people, hey, look, that's life. I mean, we all sometimes get in a situation where we have to find a way to make good. no matter whatever the circumstances are against us. That's the underdog scenario that we've lost in this country. People need to realize that it's okay to be the underdog, and because it'll bring things out in you that you normally wouldn't find out about yourself.
I think we keep going back to the word soft for some reason here in some of our conversation, and I think it's apropos because we see a lot of it now in youth sports. For one thing, I think kids should be playing multiple sports and not just one.
So, I had this discussion with Herschel Walker.
Really?
Herschel and I talked about this. He agrees with you 100%.
Well, I would like to see it go back, and I don't know if it's ever going to.
It should go back.
And I don't know if it's the power of travel ball and travel soccer. Mm-hmm. Travel ball is soccer, and baseball, and basketball. It's all in one. But I mean, I have actually heard coaches say that if you ever miss a practice because you're at another sport, you'll be off this team.
Sure.
And that's when I took my kid off the soccer team and put him on another one as soon as I heard that, because nobody's going to tell my kids, especially when I'm paying, when they can show up. They'll always be there for the games. They're not going to miss games if at all possible. If a kid's good at baseball and he's good at soccer and he loves the game of soccer more than he does baseball, and there's tournaments on the same weekend, then that's a decision that has to be made. But a coach isn't going to say, if you miss this tournament, you're not going to play for this team anymore. And that's what they're doing now. And I think this travel ball organizations have way too much power. They're taking way too much money from kids across the country, and they're cutting a lot of them out that we talked about earlier in our conversation.
Well, that's what we need.
Kids that can't afford.
That's what we need to get back to. And
we do.
I'd love to get more insight from you as this. I will look into this and see if we can find solutions and talk to more of the coaches in the San Diego area, because I'll tell you what, sports kept me out of trouble. It really kept me out of trouble. And had I not had those coaches and that time that I was able to put into those sports, I could have been a statistic. I could have been very easily, I could have went the wrong way. So I think we need to look at all that too. But I look forward to talking to you more about a lot of that.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, I certainly think that we can help some of these baseball programs.
Oh, I think so too.
In the area.
I think so too. And I think you have a lot of wisdom and knowledge. And I think kids need to hear what you have to say.
I would love to talk to kids nowadays, because I think a lot of them need to be talked to.
Yeah.
And not in terms of being given instruction where the instruction is not necessarily the right instruction. There's a lot of that going on out there too.
Well, I appreciate you for taking time out of your schedule. I know you're going to have a nice time with your family, so I don't want to keep you any longer. But when's that podcast going to be on again?
We're on Thursday at 3:00, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. We have it's Dirty Kurt's Dugout. You can find it in Spotify, Apple. All
we
the
look forward to. We need to watch that show. Everybody. He's still here. He's still good in the clutch. He's the guy. Dirty Kurt Bevacqua, of course. Thank you for being on my show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank my sponsors, because that's how I pay the electricity. And my wife would leave me if I didn't have some sponsors. So, of course, Attorney King. I don't know if you know Attorney King. He's all over San Diego. He's an amazing partner of mine. As you can see, we named a studio after him because he's given us so much love and support. And of course, Saquon Casino and Resort. Chairman Cody, thank you for what you do. And Nikki Rottens, who makes an amazing steak, ribeye, cheeseburger. You're not vegan, are you?
No.
Good.
We were talking about that in the car coming down here, though. My wife and I.
And of course, IB Fitness, Marina Teal, thank you for everything you do. And now she's expanded recently to the Houston area, and we'll be opening a fitness facility probably there. And of course, last and not least, the Wilsey Asset and Management Group. Thank you for what you guys do. Everybody take care. Wishing you a happy new year. Happy New Year, Mr. Bevacqua.
Same to you. Thank you very much.
Everybody take care. God bless, and be nice to each other.
Welcome to the Brett Davis Podcast.